I'm at the top of my game. I'm right up there with the big dogs. Girls, come on.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is a special video that I'm doing in response to a video by Tori Morrow. So Tori Morrow, I've mentioned before, she's got a fantastic channel. And I came across a video she did a year ago. So this is not a new video she's done, but this was a video about how to read more. How to kind of regulate your reading so it can be a bigger part of your life. So this was a response that she had made to some friends of hers and some people who made comments on the videos asking for advice about how to make reading more of a part of their lives. And she's given 5 tips that I wanted to refer back to and add 2 of my own as well. So it's a fantastic video. It's a really good channel. Check out Tori Morrow's video. I'm going to link it below. They're really good points. So it's not like I'm doing this video to kind of contradict the points or to you know, make some sort of critical point about them. I think they're really good points, but I'll just use my just do my own take on them and then add my own points. So similarly to Tori, my average reading turns into a sort of 60 to 70 books a year. So last year it was more than that because I was in hospital for a while and then I was at home recovering for about a month. So I did read about 110 books or something last year, but in general it's about 70 books if I'm reading proper books. So, you know, paperback novels or whatever. Especially, you know, if I'm trying to like read bigger books as well. But I know one year, look at the Goodreads stats, one year it was more than that because I read a lot more graphic novels that year and that kind of thing. But on average, there's 60 to 70 books. And I think that's still a fair amount. You can get quite a few books in that kind of number, which is quite alright, but some people read a lot more than that. But I don't think you should stress about how much you're reading. I do think that these are all tips on how to make reading more of a part of your life if you want to. So I don't think this is about what you should or shouldn't do, just what you could do if you wanted to do this. So I think I was going to jump into these points first. So as I said, these 5 points are tips that Tori Morrow made in her video. So this is like a big shout out to her channel. So I don't want to sort of see that, I don't want anyone to think I'm just ripping off her video, because I just thought it was a really good video that I wanted to make a video about. So the first point was to rediscover your tastes. So if you're starting to read again, or there's been a big gap in your reading, this was true for me, absolutely true for me. And I felt like I was out of touch with newer authors, and I had some sort of classic, because I used to read almost exclusively science fiction and fantasy, a few classics, but basically it was science fiction and fantasy. And I've been trying to read more sort of classics and things that just generally get recommended as general fiction over the last sort of 5 years, just to see what I thought out, just out of curiosity. It hasn't always worked, but sometimes it has. But still absolutely steeped in science fiction, fantasy and horror for me. But when I decided to go back to reading a lot and change my life so that I was reading a lot, I had to think about, well, what would I want to read? And I realised I didn't know the new authors, and Goodreads helped that out, and BookTube helped that out as well. And you can catch up quite quickly if you attack it ferociously. But I like what she said about rediscovering your taste and saying that your tastes do change, and you may have evolved into a different person in those 5 or 10 years, 15 years, whatever the gap was, and you might be a different person. And it can be fun, that journey about discovering what you like, especially if it's different to what you used to like. So I think you can, enjoy that a bit and don't see that as a stressful challenge or whatever. And also use the library. So she talked about the library and how much it was such a good resource for finding new books. And it's true, you can, and I'd say you could find short books to see if you like that kind of tone, that kind of style, that kind of genre, and then go bigger if you realise this is what I love. It can be hard sometimes to find short books in certain genres, but they are there. And like I said, libraries are a really good resource for you to find something without having to pay for it. I don't know if it's true nationally. I'd be interested to know if anyone's out there from the UK. You can tell me if it's a bit of a unique thing in Portsmouth where they've actually stopped the late fees. So our libraries in Portsmouth, in the old days, if you didn't hand something back in time, so you'd rent it out for a month, and if you didn't bring it back, they'd start charging you late fees. Well, they've stopped that now, which is brilliant, because when I first used to use libraries when I was a lot younger, it used to cost me money, because I used to take it back and then owe them £2 or £3 per book because I was so late in bringing it back. And now they just say you can't bring anything else out. So it still means you've got to bring the book back to use the library, and I do that, but I'm usually a little bit later in doing it, so it would have cost me money in the past. So it's really good. So the library's still free to me, even though it wasn't in the old days. So I don't know if that's just Portsmouth have done that, or if it's in general they've just stopped the late fees. Be interesting to know. So please comment below if you have got an opinion about that, or some knowledge about what your library does. So libraries are really, really good, because your taste does evolve and new authors come out. There may be some books you don't know about, and libraries can be a really nice place to just browse and just try things out. So that's a really good first point. The second point that Tori made, I've got a slight difference with. So she said read every day, which I think is absolutely brilliant point. I do read every day. But then she does say read the same amount every day. She said it doesn't matter if it's 10 minutes or 2 hours, read the same amount every day. And I don't know if that's true. It's certainly not possible for me. I'm just not that organised and that rigid in what I do. I'm quite fluid in the way I use my free time. It's just the way my brain works. I don't organise my life as rigid as that, and I wouldn't want to really. So I do read every day, and if I haven't read during the day and I'm thinking I need to go to bed or whatever, then I might do some reading before I go, just so that I know I've read a little bit more and move on to the next bit of whatever book I'm reading. So I do read every day unless it's impossible. And I do think it's really good, because even if you read a little bit, if you read like 20 pages, the way that your mind works, you've brought that back to the front of your brain. So if you leave it too long, then you've got to try and recap what you were reading. And if you've already, if you're constantly reading, then you haven't got that journey to make to bring that back to the front of your brain, which I think is really good. So I don't think it matters how much you read, and I don't think you have to read the same every day, but I do think it's a good point to read every day if you can, if you do want it to make it a big part of your life. So the third point is listen to audiobooks. So she makes a very good point that audiobooks are a really good source of ingesting a book. I'm not going to controversially say reading a book, ingesting a book while you're really busy. So if you're doing lots of different things, you can listen to an audiobook and get the book without having to sit there and read it without doing anything else. So I get that. It's a really good point. My only issue with that is actually something that Tori says herself, in that I don't get much success with audiobooks, because I end up just, my mind wanders and I don't really listen to what they're saying. So I wish I could get behind audiobooks personally. I definitely get behind them in principle, but I wish I could get a good experience with audiobooks, because I think they're a great idea. And I think if my mind didn't wander when I was listening to them, I'd definitely use them a lot more. So I do think they're really good, but for me personally, it doesn't really work. I don't know, does anyone else watching this have this experience where they really want to use audiobooks, but it doesn't really work? The fourth point is to swap screen time for reading time. I think this is a really interesting point. Part of the reason why I think it's an interesting point is because clearly Tori is a lot younger than me, and that generation absolutely values the phone in a way that I never did when I was a teenager. I mean, in my day, my teenage years, it was a home phone. It wasn't a mobile phone. But even the way I use my mobile phone now, sometimes I don't even have it all day. I'm not tied to it like the younger generation are, and that's for all sorts of reasons. But that is the way it is now, and I love the fact she's saying swap screen time for reading time. She's talking about the amount of time she spends on apps on her phone, and I can relate to it though, because I did make a conscious decision to swap my TV time and my gaming time to reading time. So I found the first thing I did when I thought I want to make more time for reading, the first thing I did was I noticed that I knew all the characters in the soaps that my wife watched, and I have no interest in the soaps whatsoever. And I realised I shouldn't be watching these. I should be doing something else. I could be reading in those, like there'd be like an hour block where I should be watching 2 soaps. And then, like in the old days, I'd be sitting there and I'd know everything, and I'm not even enjoying this, but I'm sitting here watching it. So that would be like a whole hour where you could be reading. So that was one thing. And then I realised that I was also kind of flaking out and watching absolute nonsense on the horror channel. And, you know, halfway through the Human Centipede, I'm thinking, why am I watching this? And then I'd still watch it till the end and I think, well, that was interesting, but didn't particularly enrich my life. And I could have been reading. So that's the kind of way I was thinking. Could have been reading instead of watching complete nonsense on the horror channel. I'm not suggesting everything on the horror channel is nonsense, but sometimes you do think, why am I watching this? And that happened to me a number of times. And then the other thing, which relates to this 4th point, is the gaming thing. So I was spending hours on Red Dead Redemption and on Skyrim and stuff like that. And then I realised, you know, this is crazy. I just spent 5 hours playing Red Dead Redemption, and it might have been fun, but I could have been reading. So I realised I wanted to kind of divide the time up a little bit more. So I didn't want to get rid of the gaming thing, but then spend some time reading. In that time I might have been gaming. I mean, as it happens, I haven't got a way of gaming at the moment, and I do miss it a bit, but I would miss reading a lot more if I stopped doing that. So that's a really good point. Swapping the time that you think you can spare, that you do kind of waste, for reading time. And everybody wastes some time. And sometimes it's good to flake out and not do something that requires your brain to concentrate. Absolutely. But there are some nights where you kind of overdose on that, and you do hours and hours of flaking out, not really thinking about stuff. And that can be something where you could spend some time reading, I think. So that's a really good point, I think. The 5th point was to keep a book with you. And that's something I totally get behind. I've always got a book with me. When I go on holiday, I take a number of different books. Even when I go in the car and I think I might have to wait for someone to turn up, or wait for someone to do something, and I'm going to be in the car waiting, or those kind of things. Even things that are just, you imagine there might only be like a 20-minute slot where you might read. I'll take the book just in case. You know, if I'm waiting in the doctor's and it could be a 20-minute wait, yeah, take a book. I remember the book, All My Friends Are Superheroes, I think it's called. All My Friends Are Superheroes, by Andrew Kaufman. I read the whole book because I was down the seafront and I had an appointment at the doctor's, but it was no point in me going home and coming back out again because I would have been late, and it made a lot more sense for me to just hang around down the seafront and then go to the doctor's from there. And I had the book with me, and I thought, well, I'll read this. And I read the whole book because it's quite a short book. But if I hadn't have had that, I would have just sort of wandered around seafront. I wouldn't have necessarily been bored because it's great down there, but I wouldn't have read anything because I didn't have the book with me. So having a book with you is a really good idea. That's a really good point. So the 2 points I wanted to add. The first point is to read. Oh no, sorry, there's another point. The 6th point she makes is to read at your own pace. And this is a really good point. This is, again, probably a reference to people feeling pressure to read more books. And, you know, you're a better reader if you read faster or you read more books. And I can see where that pressure might come from, but it's complete nonsense. You read what you want to read whenever you want to read. And the number of books you read should not be what you're judged on. I mean, it shouldn't be judged on whether you read anyway. But if you are trying to read more, then it doesn't matter what you read. You know, just at your own pace, and don't feel pressure to change that. I think that's just a good point. It's almost common sense, but I can see why people would feel the pressure to read more. So, the 2 points I want to add. So, it's kind of bouncing off that 6th point. My 7th point is read what you want. So, again, it's a kind of a reference to some videos I've seen recently where people say books you should read, or you know, canonical books, that kind of video, that kind of suggestion, that kind of reading list. And I don't think that should bring about pressure to read those things. If you're interested in that sort of thing, then cool, go for it, read it and enjoy it, love it, cool. If you're not really into that sort of thing, don't feel that you're not a proper reader unless you're reading it, or you're not well read if you don't read those things, and that kind of thing. You read what you want to read, and you could become an expert in whatever it is you love reading, and that's more important than being a general expert in something that could actually stop you reading because you don't like it. So read what you want. And then the last point, which I think is a point that I don't really see said very often, is consider when you are a better reader. So I've got a bad habit of waiting till the night time, thinking, oh, I need to read because I haven't read today, and then reading when I'm absolutely knackered, and I realise that I'm not taking in what I'm reading, and it's a complete waste of time. And I'll read 3 pages and think, I don't know what those 3 pages were, and I have to read it again. Or the next day, the bookmark's in a different place than it was before. I have no idea what happened in the last 20 pages. And yet, if I read in the morning, so usually when I go to work, there's usually an hour where I can do some reading before my work properly starts, because I have to get there early for various reasons. And in that hour, I definitely take more in. So I do think that sort of knowledge about when it is that you're in a better state to read is quite useful, because you might think, well, I'm going to try and focus on those times rather than just in general when I could be reading at times that doesn't really work. So I think that's a good point as well. So I don't know if that's any help to anyone. I think those 5-6 points are really good points that Tori Morrow makes. I've got those other 2 points to add to that. Check out her video in the link below. Check out her channel, it's really good. Enjoy your reading. Put the comments down below if you've watched this and you're reading something particularly good and you want to share it with me. I do think reading is a lovely thing. There are thousands, well, billions and billions of books out there, which is why I think it's quite cool. There's always going to be stuff you can read, and there's always going to be things that suit your taste. So enjoy it, because it's an awesome thing. Thanks a lot. Bye.